We wake up every morning faced with 1,000 choices: what to wear, what to eat, which route to take to work. It all seems so routine, doesn't it? But what if I told you that even these small decisions may not be as free as they seem? What if, beneath the surface of every choice, there's something far more complex at play? Something that raises profound questions about the very nature of who we are. Think about this for a moment. You've got two roads in front of you. One leads through a crowded city center. The other is quieter, with fewer distractions. Without much thought, you picked the second road, thinking it was simply your preference for peace and quiet. But was it really just a choice? Was your brain truly in control, or was something else? The environment, your past experiences, even your genetic makeup, softly nudging you towards this decision? Now, in a world where every action, no matter how trivial, is influenced by something beyond our immediate control, we must ask, are we the authors of our own actions, or are we just playing out a script written by unseen forces? This isn't a modern dilemma. In fact, the question of free will versus determinism has been debated for thousands of years. Ancient Greek philosophers like Aristotle pondered it, suggesting that free will could exist within a moral framework of cause and effect. Yet even in the 21st century, the debate continues to stir minds and spark controversies. Is free will a fundamental part of being human, or just a comforting illusion we tell ourselves? In this documentary, we'll explore this deep and unsettling question. We'll uncover whether our actions are genuinely ours to choose, or whether we are merely puppets controlled by a higher power, be it nature, society, or our own subconscious minds. So, the next time you choose what to eat for lunch, ask yourself, is it really your choice at all? Or are you simply following a path that was set for you long before you even realized it?
The debate over free will stretches back to the dawn of philosophy, where thinkers began to question the nature of human agency and the forces that shape our decisions. One of the earliest and most influential perspectives came from the ancient Greeks, particularly Aristotle, who saw human actions as the result of both rational thought and moral choices. In his view, free will was bound by our capacity for reasoning, where our desires and actions could align with our moral compass, provided we exercised proper judgment. However, even Aristotle acknowledged the complexity of this concept, as he understood that external factors like upbringing and society could heavily influence one's capacity for free decision-making. At the same time, the Stoics, led by philosophers like Epictetus and Seneca, took a much different stance. They believed in the power of reason and self-control, but they also argued that much of life was governed by fate. According to Stoic thought, while humans might possess the ability to act rationally, they were not entirely free from the influence of the natural world, which was seen as governed by divine reason. For the Stoics, true freedom came not from the ability to choose, but from accepting and understanding the deterministic nature of the universe. The dialogue between free will and determinism intensified with the rise of modern philosophy. In the 17th century, the Dutch philosopher Baruch Spinoza offered a radical vision of determinism that would shape future debates. Spinoza argued that everything in the universe, including human actions, was determined by prior causes in a chain of events stretching back to the beginning of time. For Spinoza, there was no such thing as free will. Our sense of freedom was merely an illusion created by our ignorance of the vast web of cause and effect in which we are entangled. But the clash between free will and determinism didn't end there. In the 18th century, the Scottish philosopher David Hume offered a middle ground with the development of compatibilism. Hume argued that while human actions might be influenced by prior causes, this did not negate the existence of free will. He suggested that freedom should be understood not as the ability to act without constraints, but as the ability to act according to one's desires and reasoning, even if those desires and reasons were themselves shaped by prior causes. Hume's idea of compatibilism posited that free will and determinism could coexist as long as freedom was defined in terms of acting without external coercion, rather than acting independently of all causes. As philosophy continued to evolve, other thinkers, such as Immanuel Kant and René Descartes, contributed their perspectives on free will. In particular, Kant believed that moral responsibility required the existence of free will, as he saw it as central to his theory of ethics. According to Kant, for humans to act morally, they must be free to choose between good and evil, independent of the deterministic forces around them. Descartes, too, championed human agency, famously declaring cogito ergo sum, or I think, therefore I am, which suggested that our very existence and identity are rooted in our ability to think and make choices. Through the centuries, the tension between free will and determinism has shaped the way we think about morality, responsibility, and human nature. While many philosophers have wrestled with the limits of human agency, the legacy of their work continues to influence how we understand ourselves today.
Imagine the universe as a giant clockwork mechanism, each part moving with precision and inevitability, determined by the gears and springs that came before it. This is the core idea behind determinism, the belief that every event, including human thoughts and actions, is the outcome of prior causes, all part of a vast, interconnected chain of events stretching back to the beginning of time. From this viewpoint, what we perceive as free will is nothing more than a complex illusion, a byproduct of our inability to see the vast, underlying web of causes that govern our lives. The roots of determinism can be traced to the scientific revolution of the 17th century, particularly with Isaac Newton's formulation of the laws of motion. Newton's mechanics presented the universe as a vast machine governed by immutable laws, where each object's movement was determined by the forces acting upon it. If we knew the position and velocity of every particle in the universe, Newton believed, we could predict every future event with absolute certainty. This view, known as causal determinism, suggested that if we could account for every influence, we could trace the cause of every action and event. Human beings, too, were seen as part of this machine, their actions simply the result of prior causes, whether biological, social, or environmental. But the deterministic view doesn't end with Newton. As our understanding of the world deepened, so did our understanding of the factors that shape human behavior. In the 19th and 20th centuries, advances in neuroscience and psychology suggested that our actions are heavily influenced by unconscious processes. Neuroscientific experiments, like Benjamin Libet's 1980s studies, revealed that the brain often initiates actions before we consciously decide to act. In Libet's experiments, electrodes placed on the brains of subjects showed that brain activity related to decision-making occurred milliseconds before the subjects were aware of their intention to act. This led to the unsettling conclusion that, at least in part, our choices are made unconsciously before we ever decide to act. Further compounding the case for determinism are findings in genetics and evolutionary biology. Our genetic makeup, the very DNA we inherit from our parents, shapes much of who we are, from our physical traits to our psychological predispositions.
Genes influence everything from our susceptibility to certain diseases to our tendencies towards specific behaviors, such as aggression or risk-taking. Evolutionary biology also shows how our actions are influenced by the pressures of survival and reproduction, hardwired into us through millions of years of natural selection. The very instincts that drive us, our hunger, our fear, our desire for social connection, are encoded into our biology, making our choices less free and more determined by evolutionary history. The deterministic worldview suggests that what we experience as freedom, the ability to make choices based on our desires, goals, and personal experiences, is, in fact, shaped by an array of forces beyond our control. Our personalities, preferences, and decisions are influenced by a combination of genetics, environment, and unconscious processes, leaving little room for true autonomy. The illusion of free will, then, may simply be the result of our limited perspective on the intricate web of causes and effects that govern our lives. In this view, we are not free agents, but rather passengers in a vast, predestined system. The choices we make, the actions we take, and the paths we follow are not the product of independent thought, but instead the result of an infinite chain of events stretching backward in time. In the deterministic universe, the idea of freedom might seem like a comforting fantasy, an illusion that helps us feel in control of our lives even as we are guided by forces far beyond our understanding.
At the heart of the debate over free will lies the fundamental idea of autonomy, the belief that humans are free agents, capable of making independent choices. For centuries, philosophers, theologians, and thinkers from all walks of life have defended the idea that we are not merely puppets in a deterministic world, but individuals with the power to shape our destinies. If we are to understand ourselves as morally responsible beings, capable of right and wrong, then it is essential that we have the ability to choose freely, free from external compulsion. One of the key arguments for free will is rooted in human experience. Despite the vast and often overwhelming influence of genetics, environment, and societal pressures, people regularly feel as though they are making decisions on their own. In everyday life, we have an innate sense of agency, the ability to reflect on our choices, consider various options, and make decisions that align with our personal values and desires. This sense of autonomy is so deeply ingrained in us that it's almost impossible to imagine living without it. When we choose what to wear, decide how to spend our time, or make life-changing choices, we experience these acts as exercises of free will. Psychology and cognitive science provide further support for the idea that humans have the ability to make free choices. Studies on decision-making show that people engage in a complex mental process when making choices, weighing pros and cons, evaluating options, and reflecting on potential outcomes. The brain is not simply a passive receiver of information. It actively processes and interprets the world around us, enabling us to make decisions based on our individual preferences, past experiences, and emotions. Even in the face of unconscious influences or environmental pressures, humans retain a degree of control over how they respond to stimuli, reinforcing the idea that free will is part of the human experience. One of the most powerful real-world arguments for free will comes from the realm of moral responsibility. In criminal justice systems across the world, individuals are held accountable for their actions, with the assumption that they had the capacity to choose between right and wrong. If free will did not exist, then it would be impossible to hold people responsible for their behavior. Imagine a world where every crime, every act of kindness, and every personal decision was seen as the product of forces beyond the individual's control. Such a world would make moral judgment, and by extension justice, meaningless. In this context, the belief in free will is essential for maintaining the principles of fairness and accountability. Furthermore, free will is a cornerstone of ethical theories. From Kant's deontological ethics to the consequentialist theories of Mill and Bentham, the concept of free will is integral to understanding how we should behave toward one another. Kant, in particular, argued that moral duties could only be meaningful if we have the freedom to choose our actions. Without free will, ethics would become a hollow exercise, unable to guide people toward right or wrong choices. In this view, free will is not just a philosophical abstraction, but the foundation of morality itself. Thus, the fight for free will is not merely a philosophical debate, it is the defense of the very essence of what it means to be human. If we are not free to make choices, then we lose the ability to define ourselves, to act according to our values, and to hold ourselves and others accountable for our actions. The belief in free will allows us to maintain our moral and ethical responsibilities and gives our lives meaning and purpose. Without it, we risk losing the very foundation of human dignity.
For centuries, the debate between free will and determinism has been seen as an all-or-nothing argument. Either we have complete freedom to choose, or we are simply puppets of a preordained universe. But what if the two ideas are not mutually exclusive? What if there's a way to reconcile them, allowing for both the influence of prior causes and the experience of genuine freedom? This is where compatibilism enters the conversation, an approach that seeks to harmonize free will and determinism. Compatibilism asserts that we can still be held responsible for our actions, even if those actions are shaped by prior causes. Philosophers like John Locke and David Hume helped pioneer this view, suggesting that true freedom does not require the absence of causality. Instead, freedom is about acting according to one's desires, intentions, and reasoning, without being coerced or forced by external pressures. As long as an individual's actions stem from their own motivations, whether those motivations are shaped by biology, upbringing, or prior events, they can be considered free in a moral sense. Daniel Dennett, a leading figure in modern compatibilist thought, takes this idea even further. Dennett argues that free will is not about being able to act independently of external influences, but about having the capacity to reflect on our actions, make deliberate choices, and adapt to new situations. According to Dennett, human consciousness and self-awareness are key factors in creating the experience of free will. Our minds may be shaped by prior causes, our genetics, environment, and life experiences, but they also give us the ability to consciously consider alternatives, evaluate consequences, and make decisions that align with our values. In other words, our actions may be influenced by factors beyond our control, but our awareness of those influences allows us to act in ways that feel free. When we choose a course of action, we do so with the knowledge of our desires and goals, even if those desires and goals are themselves shaped by forces outside our control. In this sense, our ability to act according to our reasoning, even within a world governed by causality, constitutes genuine freedom. Ultimately, compatibilism offers a way to maintain personal responsibility and moral agency even in a world where determinism reigns. By recognizing the complex interplay between external influences and our capacity for self-awareness, we can embrace the idea that free will exists not in the absence of causes, but in our ability to reflect and act upon those causes. In this middle ground, free will and determinism coexist, giving us a more nuanced understanding of human action and responsibility.
In recent decades, groundbreaking experiments in neuroscience have added a compelling layer to the debate between free will and determinism. These findings suggest that the human experience of making decisions, of exercising free will, might not be as autonomous as we believe. Instead, it could be the result of unconscious processes that occur in the brain long before we become aware of them, challenging the very idea of conscious control over our actions. One of the most famous and controversial experiments in this area was conducted by Benjamin Libet in the 1980s. Libet's experiment involved measuring the brain activity of participants as they were asked to make a simple voluntary movement, such as pressing a button at their own discretion. Through the use of an EEG, electroencephalography, Libet discovered that the brain activity associated with the decision to move occurred several hundred milliseconds before the participants were consciously aware of their intention to act. This finding raised a profound question. If the brain has already initiated the action before we become conscious of it, do we truly have free will, or are our actions determined by unconscious neural processes? Libet's findings have been both revolutionary and controversial. On one hand, they suggest that much of what we perceive as conscious decision-making might actually be the result of unconscious brain activity. The conscious mind, rather than being the originator of our actions, seems to be more of a latecomer, merely reporting or rationalizing decisions that have already been made by deeper neurological mechanisms. This could imply that our experience of free will is an illusion built on the feeling of being in control, even though our brains have already made the decision for us. However, Libet's findings are not conclusive. Critics argue that his experiment, while groundbreaking, only addresses simple motor actions and may not apply to more complex decisions that involve higher-order reasoning and reflection. Furthermore, Libet himself acknowledged that while unconscious brain activity may precede conscious awareness, this does not necessarily negate the possibility of free will. He suggested that conscious awareness could still play a role in vetoing or altering actions before they are fully executed, a concept known as the veto power. In this view, the conscious mind may not initiate every action, but it could still intervene and prevent or change a course of action, preserving a degree of autonomy. Beyond Libet, further studies in neuroscience and psychology have continued to shed light on the relationship between brain function and decision-making. Research into how the brain processes emotions, memories, and sensory input shows how much of our behavior is shaped by automatic, unconscious processes. For example, cognitive biases like the confirmation bias, where we selectively gather information that supports our pre-existing beliefs, demonstrate that our decisions are often influenced by factors beyond our conscious awareness. The brain's reliance on past experiences, emotions, and environmental cues means that even our most thoughtful decisions may be swayed by unseen forces within us. This body of research compels us to rethink our understanding of personal responsibility. If our decisions are largely shaped by unconscious brain processes, how can we hold individuals fully responsible for their actions? Are we truly free to choose, or are we merely following the course set by the intricate workings of our brains, genetics, and past experiences? These questions challenge the foundational assumptions of moral responsibility and force us to reconsider the very nature of human agency. In a world where decisions are influenced, if not determined, by unconscious forces, the line between choice and inevitability becomes increasingly blurred.
The ongoing debate over free will versus determinism does not merely reside in academic discussions or abstract philosophical thought. It has profound implications for how we live, govern, and relate to one another in society. If free will is merely an illusion, then it forces us to reevaluate how we understand human behavior, morality, and responsibility. On the other hand, embracing the concept of free will offers its own set of consequences for societal structures and systems of justice. In the realm of criminal justice, the implications of this debate are particularly striking. The very foundation of modern legal systems is built upon the assumption that individuals are responsible for their actions and that they can be held accountable for crimes they commit. If we were to accept that free will is an illusion, then would this undermine our entire system of law and order? If people are not in control of their actions, then are they truly guilty of their crimes? Or are they merely victims of prior causes, their genetics, upbringing, environment, or mental state? This raises questions about punishment and rehabilitation. Should we punish offenders if they were determined by circumstances beyond their control? Or should we focus on rehabilitation,
treating crimes as symptoms of deeper societal or psychological issues. Moreover, if we reject personal responsibility entirely, what does this mean for our broader ethical frameworks? Moral responsibility hinges on the idea that individuals are capable of choosing between right and wrong. If free will is an illusion, then the foundation of ethics becomes precarious. How do we judge someone's actions, or even our own, if we believe that we are simply following predetermined paths? The consequences of abandoning personal responsibility could be far-reaching, leading to a breakdown in social cohesion, where accountability, trust, and justice become undermined. Without a belief in free will, society might struggle to maintain a moral order, as individuals would no longer be seen as accountable for their actions. On the flip side, the belief in free will has its own societal benefits, particularly when it comes to accountability. Holding people responsible for their actions encourages ethical behavior, personal growth, and societal progress. Believing in free will allows individuals to be agents of change, with the power to shape their destinies, make choices, and improve their circumstances. This belief fosters the notion of justice, that individuals are capable of righting their wrongs, compensating for their actions, and pursuing moral excellence. In a society that values free will, there is a collective investment in the idea that people can change, grow, and take ownership of their actions. However, embracing free will opens up complex questions in relation to contemporary social issues. For example, how much control do individuals have over their circumstances in cases of addiction, poverty, or mental illness? If we accept the view that external forces, such as socioeconomic conditions, family history, or chemical imbalances in the brain, significantly shape behavior, then can we hold someone fully accountable for their actions in the same way we might expect from someone with more privilege or stability? Many advocates for social justice argue that individuals trapped in cycles of poverty or addiction have limited control over their lives, and therefore deserve compassion and systemic support rather than judgment. This perspective doesn't dismiss personal responsibility entirely, but it does suggest that the extent of our control over our lives might be far more limited than we care to admit. The debate over free will, then, also raises fundamental questions about justice, equity, and equality in modern society. Are we truly free to make choices, or are we operating under constraints that limit our options? These questions challenge our assumptions about power, privilege, and the human condition, compelling us to consider the social structures that shape our lives. The free will debate is more than a philosophical question. It is a matter of how we structure our societies, define moral responsibility, and understand human behavior. Whether we accept the idea of free will or acknowledge the constraints of determinism, the debate forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about the nature of control, justice, and accountability in our world.
As we return to the core question that has shaped centuries of philosophical debate, do we truly have free will, or is it merely an illusion? We find ourselves at the intersection of uncertainty and possibility. We've explored the powerful arguments for both sides: determinism, which suggests that every action is an inevitable consequence of prior causes, and free will, which asserts our autonomy to choose and shape our destiny. But the complexity of the human experience cannot be reduced to a simple either-or answer. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between, as compatibilism suggests, where freedom exists not in the absence of causality, but in our ability to reflect on, choose, and act within the framework of those influences. Perhaps in acknowledging both freedom and determinism, we gain a deeper understanding of human nature, one that embraces the reality of external forces while still allowing for personal responsibility, growth, and moral agency. At the heart of this debate is the question of human agency,
our capacity to make choices, to be responsible for our actions, and to live lives of meaning and purpose. Whether we believe in the illusion of free will or the truth of determinism, one thing remains clear. We must continue to question the forces that shape us and the systems that govern our lives. The more we understand about ourselves, the world around us, and the complex interplay of biology, society, and mind, the closer we come to understanding what it means to truly be human. So, the next time you face a choice, however small or monumental, ask yourself, is this truly your decision? Or are you merely following a path that was set for you long before you even realized it? The answer may not be as clear as we wish, but it's a question worth asking, for it's in these questions that we find the essence of our existence.